Hey there, listeners, and welcome to Project Zero, where we hear about the journeys of some of the best project leaders in the game. My name is Alex Tuck, and I am the host. I am here today with a co founder of Navigate, Pete Walker. Welcome to the podcast, Pete.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate you having me. Glad we were able to get scheduled.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about your Project Zero. Bet you it's going to be a good one. Start us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into project management, and what you do at Navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing project management for it seems like a long time, decades now. Right now, though, Navigate is really focused on transformation projects and process reengineering for clients where we're coming in looking at their big problems and big ideas and then boiling those down into various tangible projects. So things like how does a company increase their sales by double digits? How do they adopt enterprise Gen AI and keep it so that it's actually productive and secure for highly regulated businesses? How do they make the products that they make in a safer, more energy efficient manner? This is some of the things that we look at on behalf of a wide range of clients. But everything does boil into a project. So while you can strategize and come together on what your way forward would be, you really have to break down these sort of enterprise monumental strategy concepts and ideas into tangible things where you can actually go deliver value. And that's where we use a ton of various project management skills across our clients to deliver value for them.
Awesome. That's great. And you're an engineer originally and then got into project management. Is that right?
Yeah, by trade, my undergraduate, I have two actually. It's very strange. I have an industrial engineering degree from Purdue University, and I also happen to have a bachelor's degree in psychology. So two wildly different scientific exploits from an education standpoint, engineering being very mathematical, very formulaic, and very focused on things, whereas the psychology piece is the listening and the understanding. And you'd be amazed how often you put the two things together from a project standpoint. It really just blends very well with the strict processes and things that we like to follow to get things done. And then the human element that you're always dealing with in a project standpoint. Those two base skill sets work pretty well together. And most folks have added an MBA on top of that throughout the years as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool. How'd you get into project management eventually out of the engineering and psychology realm?
Yeah, variety of different work assignments. While I was in school, everything was very operational focused. Started working out of in supply chain for Subaru, then went to work, moved back home to Vermont, was doing some production manufacturing and a variety of other different things. And it was time to switch jobs again. And my first real exposure to regulated project management work was being brought in to do an ERP transformation for General Dynamics in the aerospace and defense area. And really understanding and having a structure of, hey, we have a very strict scope, we have a very strict timeline. Here are its project management tools. Back then it was a fancy Excel spreadsheet, and we have to go get this new ERP system in and owning a piece of that project that was around procurement and master scheduling and planning.
So that's your project zero.
It
Is that
really is. Yeah. And it's funny because over time I've realized that everything I've been doing is project. Like I used to do work when I was younger, like a teenager and stuff. And I would have people would say, hey, we need you to help stack and move this wood, this pile of wood. Or there was one thing that I was doing with a barn where I was pulling out and tearing down an old school barn in Vermont. And those turned out to be really projects too. I just never organized and thought of them that way until my project zero with General Dynamics and understanding in the big scope of moving an ERP across a variety of different functional areas of the company and owning that one piece of it. And how does it fit together with everybody, and then being working for a large scale public company that's highly regulated, all the different things, blocking and tackling you have to do to move a project or move something to a finish line.
that's so interesting. Did you have the role of project manager there, or were you still part of the
I,
engineering team?
I was brought in as a project manager specifically to handle the master scheduling and planning and the procurement conversion. The year parlance, just those modules. And so
Interesting.
other people had finance, other folks had HR. So you're working all as part of the larger program team. But yeah, I was brought in and they wanted a fresh person to come in and look at that didn't have a lot of legacy knowledge because it was a very old school company that had been working there for 20 and 30 years. And they really wanted to hire from the outside for this PM role because they wanted somebody to come in and not go, this is the way we've always done it. So it was actually pretty smart thinking, I think, on the part of the folks that were hiring and doing the project to bring somebody in from the outside versus just a project manager that was internal into that role. I think as you're new, you're asking a lot of whys. You ask a lot of questions.
I don't think we had anyone that has named an ERP as their project zero. I'm really interested to can you take us through what some of that planning looked like when you were here a little while ago at General Dynamics?
It was part of a post-acquisition change. So it was something that General Dynamics had acquired a portion of a business, Lockheed Martin's business. And so Lockheed's systems had to go away and General Dynamics had to be incorporated. So you were using an existing ERP that had structures and functions. So it was really nice to be able to tap into mentors and experts from an ERP standpoint that were with legacy General Dynamics. But the interesting thing was the business models were so drastically different. The types of things that they were producing were completely different. You had to recreate structures and how business was done on the fly with the reality of what was actually happening on the shop floor from a scheduling standpoint or the way procurement for different parts and things were taking place. So while they were brought in a lot of templates and a lot of knowledge about the application and thing in itself, there was still an interestingly large amount of design that had to take place from the reality of the way the parts and the equipment actually got built and applying the structures in the ERP so that it would fit the manufacturing process.
Did you have a PMP back then?
I did not. No, PMP was not something I picked up until almost 8 or 9 years after that Project Zero. And the PMP was more of a suggested, it was like, hey, you've now done 4 enterprise ERPs. Because like after this one, I worked for General Dynamics for a few more years and then went over and ended up working for IBM Semiconductor. And I ended up doing 3 enterprise level ERP changes for them. It was moving to SAP and then subsequently bumping through 3 different SAP versions while I was working with them. And then it got to be suggested later in my IBM career, hey, you might want to put this PMP thing on your resume to help open doors. So
Interesting.
I think I was a pretty well-versed technical project manager by the time I had gone to PMP. So it was interesting the things that they were prescribing as part of that curriculum and the balancing that with the reality of having done so many other reality projects on such a large scale for really big organizations.
Yeah, it's so chicken and egg there. PMP is awesome. The stuff you learn from
Yeah.
the inbox, like it's really can be really helpful if you take the nuggets out. And it really depends on who you are. And like we were just talking about this earlier before we got on this. Probably 75% of it we don't even need with most of the projects that we're doing because they're more straightforward. But if you're working on some of these larger scale ERP implementations, or if you're building a rocket or doing something like pretty technical, that PMP is really helpful. There's a lot of tools you can pull from that.
I think that's what it is. It's a tool. I don't know that it's described well enough for people that are considering it. It is a tool chest full of different tools. And you will have brought tools with you to add to that tool chest. And you will acquire ones after you do it. But it's like a big tool, project management tool starter kit.
Yeah,
Not
sure.
everything applies, but there's a variety of different things that can be used in there.
Yeah. This podcast is really geared towards folks that are either like trying to move into project management or maybe they're early mid career and maybe they haven't done a big project like the ones that we're talking about now. How did you even figure out how to PM this stuff? Like the different mechanisms that you could use? Did you have a mentor on your project zero that helped you build some stuff out?
I didn't really have a mentor per se, like I said, because it was part of an acquisition. There were a lot of templates and, hey, this is what our schedules look like. And here are some of the moving parts for that. And here's how we do status reporting. And here's our scope documents. So some of that stuff was provided, but I would say, like, how did you learn? It was a lot of trial and error. So what worked best for what you were doing? And I'm a firm believer, and I think by Project Zero is the thing that reinforced this is to really fail fast forward. Is get the information out, try stuff and see what sticks. And then take the ego out of it and be prepared to pivot very quickly if it doesn't work. And what do you go to next? And then get that feedback loop going. Hey, we tried this. This is not working from a communication standpoint. This is not working from a schedule standpoint, budget, whatever it happens to be on the main pillars, and get the feedback on what's not working and then make the adjustments as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So talking about failing early and often, were there any big bumps that you hit that are noteworthy? And do you want to talk about like how you overcame them?
Yeah, I think the first one was just putting together the original schedule. I had overestimated how much time or how quickly people were going to be able to dedicate time to doing this implementation. So people that had everyday jobs were not part of this, although they had to use the ERP. So I had built a schedule that was extremely utopic that said, hey, these key players, these SMEs are carved out and they're going to be fully focused on doing this. And it became very apparent after presenting that schedule and being looked at by the senior leadership, the senior steerco, that was not not going to take place. There was a lot of outright laughter and chuckles going, yeah, that would be great if we let you go hire a full team and everybody do all this stuff and this is all they were doing. The honest answer is no. We have product to move out the door. These people have other responsibilities. And so it was a very interesting, very eye-opening thing going, wait a minute, there's other human factors involved. You can't just plot a schedule on what looks good. It's that engineering mindset of, hey, the math works. It says that if I have a process that takes 10 days, I should be able to start on the first and be done on the 10th, not taking into account those world factors. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges and eye openers was getting that lesson and then understanding to put that together. You really had to go talk to the individual people that you needed to be part of to get their inputs into building that overall schedule. One of the fears, because it was so early in my career too, was this fear of the senior executive team when they're putting out mandates. Hey, we need to be on this budget. We need to be done by such and such a date. Sometimes your real world schedule doesn't actually meet up with what their mandate is. And there's very good reasons for that. But being able to communicate and negotiate the reasons behind why you're not going to meet their original mandate and handling that messaging is also another lesson that Project Zero taught. That they're not all these people that are edicting a schedule or edicting a budget don't always have all the information. They're looking at it from a much different lens than the practicality of what can actually be done versus what they would ultimately like to be. And so you as a project manager have that responsibility to communicate what can actually take place and have that be a concrete conversation of, hey, I've tried to push these areas to compress the schedule to get to where you want to, but these are the reasons that it can't, and be able to lay that out and explain it in a non-emotional, very solid business direction way for them to get them to adopt to that.
Yeah, I love that. And you did it. You transitioned without me even driving us there, but like moving towards the lessons, right? Because again, this Project Zero is a great tool for early stage project managers to hear like what it's actually like to run big projects. We worked on the exchange together and we built this elaborate waterfall project plan with thousands and thousands of lines of tasks. And I remember going and sitting down with teams and like the leaders didn't even show up because it was
Right.
so preposterous. Like it was just like it was never gonna happen. Like we were trying to build this massive piece of software with changing requirements like every single day, doing a waterfall project with thousands of lines. And that you learn like, oh my God, what was I trying to do here? You don't know how to do that until you either hear someone else's failure or like you do it yourself and you fail.
And sometimes
Yeah.
even when you hear the lessons or other people will tell you about them,
Yeah.
you're so eager to do the right things and to deliver value in these kinds of things that you get blinded, right?
Yeah.
You're the forest through the trees sort of analogy where you're like, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, I get it's complex, but we'll break it down into these bite-sized chunks. And like you said, on the health exchange, it was like, there may be 1,000 different task lines, but we group those together into, 250 logical milestones, right? Everybody should get that. No problem. We'll make it happen. We only have 7 different vendors that we're dealing with and, all these other things that are not in your control. So
Yeah.
sometimes, and I mean, maybe that's one of the key lessons with this is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid. You're going to make mistakes with it and you're going to find your own way. And the way that Alex would do something or the way that Pete would do something in project scenario is not necessarily the way somebody else would do it, but it doesn't mean that all of them can't be successful.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of success and being a good project manager, like what do you think the number one skill is for a project manager and why?
Communication.
Mm.
I say this all the time to folks. It's communication. It's your listening skills, your ability to deliver. We were talking about a little bit with my Project Zero, your ability to deliver news that people don't necessarily want to hear, but it's the reality. And you have to do that. You can't be afraid of the less good or the bad news, right? You have to be upfront early and often in your communications. You have to talk to people on adapting how do they want to be communicated with. And that's not just your key sort of sponsors from an executive stakeholder standpoint, but that's all the various SMEs that you have to work with, the various you have such a great big stakeholder list, and even in small projects that you have to understand everybody has a different way with which they absorb and take in information. And so to me, the biggest thing is communication. And you can apply it outside of project management, obviously, as well. But with all of the different things that are available to you with scope and schedule and all the tools and things, I think communication is the single most important factor because it will fail your project no matter how successful you could deliver on scope and budget if people don't adopt or don't think that it was me they were a meaningful part of what was taking place.
Yeah, for sure. It was funny. I was just on a LinkedIn Live earlier and I started to say, we're trying to be a leader in AI for project management. But then I said right after that, you can try all you want, but you're a leader only if people follow. And I think we're starting to see that with our organization, but it's the same thing that you're describing, right? Like if you don't communicate a sense of like confidence within your project team, no one's going to follow you. So you're not going to have any influence across that entire group. So I completely agree. Like communication, just delivering good news, delivering bad news, celebrating stuff, influencing things. It's so important for project
Mhm.
managers.
It is. And I would say it's the one thing that, as you mentioned AI a little bit,
Yep.
it's the one thing that AI can help with it, but it will never fully replace your communication. So you can use AI to help with your status reports and your action items and those kinds of things, but there's still people involved with every project that you do, right? And so that people to people interaction still has to take place from a communication standpoint for adoption, for understanding, for change. And that's where I think AI can enable that, but it will never fully replace it from a project standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Do you think the role of the project manager is going to exist 5 to 10 years from now? Or is it going to be called something different? What's the deal?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to evolve. Everything is a project, right? In my mind, it's all a project. Everything has a scope, schedule, budget, that has to, that has to be met, as long as it's not normal day-to-day operations. And even if you look at financial closes that businesses do every quarter and their year-end book processing, those two are projects. They may do them repeatedly and it's operational business, but it has all the elements of the project and somebody has to lead those initiatives. Somebody's always going to be defaulted to be that leader to bring all the various parties together to get something done, whether it's called project management or not, that, you know, it has to be fed, it has to be cared for by someone. And it's interesting because if it does evolve out to project management going by the wayside, or companies going, hey, we don't need our PMOs or EPMOs in the organization anymore. We don't need project managers. We're just going to do this. I think you're going to find what you had maybe 20, 25 years ago in business, which is there was not really project managers around and they were relying on their senior seasoned operators to try and get improvements done, or transformations done within a business, and they would often fail, right? We go back to sort of my Project Zero and my ERP experiences. There's so many documented things where ERP implementations and transformations fail. Well, the biggest reason is they don't dedicate the right resources to make that happen. They just stack that onto the backs of their operational folks. They were very knowledgeable, but don't have the time and bandwidth to be able to handle that. So regardless if it's called project management or not, it's going to have to use the same principles that we continue to talk about to get transformation done in organizations.
I think that you mentioned the main thing, the main blocker for project management to be outsourced to another group, aside from a true project manager. And that's the fact that like the project manager's only role is to make that project be successful. And not their only role, but it's the main goal of what that project manager is doing. And so if you outsource that to a functional leader or a senior leader or a high ranking individual contributor, that person has other things that they have to focus on. They have other goals and initiatives that they have to push forward in addition to potentially driving the success of a project. So I think for that reason, it's good. The other thing is we as project leaders, our responsibility is to bubble up the information to other people so that other smart people can make the decisions. And if you don't have someone playing that facilitator role, I think you miss out on that too.
Depending upon who gets selected, right? If it isn't into one of those individual contributors or a senior executive with a certain purview, you can lack adoption where it needs to be because not everybody feels like they have a voice. And with a project manager, there's some level of neutrality with what we do. Our goal is to get the project completed and delivered and across the line. But there's a level of neutrality where you can take all the voices and present a logical case for why a decision should be made in one direction or another. Whereas if you have other people within an organization that are expected to lead in that capacity, they're going to view that through the lens with which they're tasked in their day to day role. So if you have a finance leader leading something, they're going to come at it with a financial lens. If you have a technology person, they're going to come at it with a technology lens. There's just no way around it. It's just how that works. So I think we do add a level of anonymity and allow companies to have a broader voice by having a dedicated project manager. Whether that's what we're called or not in the future is who knows.
Yeah. Honestly, that's why we hire consultants in other stuff. And that's why we are consultants in project management, because sometimes it's just more helpful for a client to say, hey, look, we're bringing this outside firm so that we don't bias one direction or another. If you were to give one or two pieces of advice to someone that maybe they're just getting out of college or maybe they're transitioning into project management, what do you think they need to work on early in their career?
I think having a good detailed organization skills are things that I would focus on. So whatever they get tasked with, if somebody comes out of school and they're put into an accounting role, or they're put into an engineering role, or whatever it happens to be, start looking at the things that you are being asked to do on a day-to-day basis and think about it from a scheduling and scope standpoint. Get very clear. Start thinking about scope statements from the standpoint of, hey, I'm being asked to do this, but what are the parameters of it? What is inside and what is outside of the scope? The other thing is schedule. Even though it's maybe a day-to-day task or a week-to-week set of tasks, how does that break out into subtaskings? And so those are the things that I would look at, even as somebody, whether they were considering project management or not. I think just early career advice is having understanding and being able to confirm scopes and schedules and breaking larger tasks into smaller pieces, bite-sized pieces that can be done, I think are two sort of skill sets that I would focus on. And you can usually, and even if it's not under the guise of finding a project management mentor, you can usually find people within your organization that are really good at being able to provide advice and tidbits on how to scope and schedule.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I have never thought about that. I'm going to start asking that question in my interviews for consultants now because it's a really interesting you have your process, I have my process for how I organize my year, quarter, month, week, day, hour. I'm one of those people that has an entire calendar time blocked, top to bottom, color coded, because I need my independent time and all my meeting time, my prep time. But that doesn't work for everyone, right? But
Right.
just having your own flavor of how you organize, that's the important thing. I've tried so many different methods, and that's just the one that works for me. So,
And we all find a sense of pride and accomplishment in different ways, right? So some people need more short-term accomplishments. So how do you break down your tasks to go, yeah, I'm doing a good job here, or they maybe need a higher feedback circle, or so it's all those things are about finding about who you are as a person, whether it's project manager or whatever. How do you break that up? How do you do that? Some people can deal with larger chunks that are a little bit more anonymous with their time blocks. Like, oh, I've got 4 hours for this, and I know I have to get these three things done. That's fine. Other people may need to say, nope, I need 45 minutes for this, 30 minutes for this, and the balance of the time C for that. You consider it not just with how you like to do the work, but I think your feedback loop is important too. Is like, how do you want to feel successful that you've accomplished something? And then how do you get that outside input from others? How frequently do you want that? How many checkpoints are good for you to feel like you're moving things forward?
love that. Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. Such good advice. I'm gonna start doing that with my mentees now. Just ask them to start thinking about that.
I've
Cool.
used it for quite a number of years, honestly. It
Awesome.
gives everybody a different way of doing it, but within the same concepts. Because we all do it. We all look at things very differently.
That's right. That's the key, right? Is for folks to realize there is no exact perfect way for any individual, right? So love that.
What worked for you 5 years ago may not work going forward because you may have evolved. The types of things you're working on may evolve as well.
True, true. I love it. I think that's a great one to end on, Pete. Like how thank you so much. All your insights were awesome. How do people get in contact with you?
They can go to the Navigate and Co website. So it's Navigate and Co, ANDOCO, or ANDCO.com. Phone numbers, everything is out there. LinkedIn. They can always work back through you, Alex, because you know how to get in touch with me as well.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, Pete. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who joined us on for Project Zero this week. Be sure to subscribe to Project Zero wherever you get your podcasts, and we will catch you next time with another great project leader story.